This week's Parsha, Bereshiyt, in the beginning, also known as Genesis, is the first Parsha of the Torah portion cycle. In Bereshiyt, we have the creation account where the God of all creation, the God of the universe, created the heavens and the earth. We'll go more in depth into this week's topic shortly. Thank you so much for joining me for this anniversary episode. Thanks be to the Lord, it has been a full year since uploading the introduction video. If you haven't seen the introduction video yet and you'd like to learn more about what this channel is all about, the video will be listed in the description box. The year this video is being uploaded will be the bee year of this channel, which is great because I love bees. If you would like to see last year's Bereshiyt A video, Vegan Eggplant Parmesan, it will also be listed in the description box. Now that we are starting the Torah portions over again, if you know anyone that would be interested in finding out what the Lord has taught me about being Messianic that He has allowed me to share over the past year, please feel free to share the playlist that will be on the end screen under All Videos playlist. I pray the videos are a blessing. My goal is to reach as many people for Yeshua as possible in whatever time the Lord has left for me and all of us. The way that this video is received will give me lots of input on the direction I will be taking with future videos on this channel. Liking the video, subscribing to the channel, sharing the playlist, and commenting will all be greatly appreciated if you're so inclined, and may the Lord richly bless you. I am so excited about this episode, which has been a goal of mine for quite a long time. Anyone who knows me knows that the Shabbat is one of my favorite aspects of being Messianic. So without too many preliminaries, except to explain that I will be using Shabbat and Sabbath interchangeably for this video, I just want to get into what the Lord has for me to tell you about the Shabbat. I truly pray it is a blessing. What is the Shabbat? As stated in the intro, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He made the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. In this parasha, Bereshiyt, it states, on the seventh day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. This seventh day of creation is known as the Sabbath, in Hebrew, Shabbat. And as you probably already know, it is a day that recurs every 7 days. In the Hebrew calendar, a new day begins at sundown, from the verse where it says evening and the morning, so the Shabbat begins on Friday at sundown and ends Saturday at sundown. The fourth commandment states to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In the Hebrew thought, if something is repeated, like holy, 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 it increases the importance or meaning exponentially. The Shabbat is repeated over 50 times in a Hebrew year, so imagine how important the Shabbat is to the Lord. Furthermore, throughout the Tanakh, as well as the Renewed Covenant, the Shabbat is listed in 155 verses. I think that it goes without saying that the Shabbat is very important to God. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. The word commonly translated as sanctified or holy means set apart. Not only is the Shabbat holy, if we believe Yeshua is our Messiah and become part of God's people, so are we. As His holy and set apart nation, we are fully expected to observe and keep the Shabbat, even if it may be foreign to us and out of our comfort zone. When Yeshua, the Lord of the Sabbath, came, he lived out the word of God and kept the Shabbat, entering the synagogue, healing, performing miracles, teaching about the Sabbath, as did his disciples. Throughout history, God's people have always kept and defended the Shabbat, and many times they have even lost their lives for doing so. One example is when the Maccabees, from the historical account of the soon-coming holiday of Hanukkah, were forced to disobey God's laws, including the Sabbath, and many of them died rather than submit to man's edicts that told them to disobey God. If you would like to learn more regarding what I have discovered about that topic, please see the Shabbat video I did some years ago that will be listed in the description box. As part of spiritual Israel, I choose to stand with God's people in Israel and throughout the world, past, present, and future, who believe that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, meaning that the Shabbat is still in effect and always will be. The injuries and losses of life are Jewish brothers and sisters in the Lord who have been tortured and killed while attempting to guard and keep the Sabbath, as well as those of other faiths who have defended them, have not been in vain, and their sacrifices are forever honored, and we are eternally grateful. How do we keep the Shabbat? So for those of us who subscribe to the Shabbat and desire to keep it, but who have not been brought up in the Jewish faith, the thought of keeping the Shabbat may bring up a lot of questions and gray areas. My family and I were not raised with the Jewish customs, so since beginning our Messianic journey, we have had to learn as we went along, of course using the scriptures as our authoritative manual and traditions as a helpful and supplementary appendix. Before getting into scripture, I must get into one of the biggest theological questions some may have about the Sabbath. Does not keeping Shabbat affect my salvation? I have spoken a bit about salvation in other videos, Among some are the Kingdom of God series, but at the very least, when we hear the word salvation throughout Scripture, it is pronounced Yeshua, the Hebrew name of our Messiah. Yeshua came to save his people from their sins. Not keeping the Shabbat is a sin, and not keeping it is not pleasing to the Lord. He wants us to repent, shuv, or turn back to him. Keeping the Shabbat or any part of the Torah is a blessing, and we will be blessed for keeping it. I have said it in other videos, but in the Hebrew thought, faith is not faith, as we commonly use the word. It is emunah, or faithfulness, and without faithfulness, it is impossible to please God. We are promised a certain level of protection and blessings for keeping the Shabbat, especially in the end times. Speaking about that, Yeshua said, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? So if we read that verse again, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faithfulness on the earth? Knowing that he is our husband and we are his wife, the verse may give us a different, maybe even a quite uncomfortable picture. I pray that this verse helps us to stay faithful to Yeshua in whatever we do, and that includes the Sabbath, which I take to be a sort of date night that we faithfully keep with him. Some people use the term divine appointment. God the Father set the date for each week at a certain time, and hopefully we will keep that appointment faithfully. The Shabbat and following God's word to the best of our ability, according to my beliefs, is not about heaven and hell. Keeping the commandments, which includes the Shabbat, is about obedience to God, one of the ways to enter into life, blessing, and supernatural protection, which we will be discussing a bit further ahead. The Sabbath is also a sign which distinguishes God's children, which are those who put their faith in Yeshua as their Messiah, from his bride, those who seek to please him in everything they do. If we can look at it in a different way, as his children, we don't have to keep the Sabbath, but as a bride, we get to keep the Sabbath, and each week we await it with eager anticipation. If we do think about the Shabbat as our date night with the Lord, if we were on a special romantic date with our significant other, whom we love more than anything, it would be rather rude to be texting other people, engaged in other forms of entertainment, etc. That is the way it is with us on Shabbat. He wants our undivided attention, so that our time with him is extra special. And as my best friend and dear sister in the Lord says, if we substitute Sabbath for Sunday, we will wind up being a day late for our weekly appointment with the Lord. A passage in Isaiah says, if you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. The word delight is mentioned 2 times in that passage. The word delight is the word oneg, which is another name for the meal that is held after the weekly Shabbat service. It's actually called a Shabbat oneg, or delight in the Sabbath. Isn't that fabulous? According to one site, an oneg is the food put out after Shabbat services. Lingering, talking, and eating after services on Shabbat adds to the feeling of Shabbat being different from other days of the week when we rush to get to our next activity. It also lets us meet and greet other members of our community. According to the prophet Isaiah, the Sabbath shall be a delight. By having something sweet to nosh on, delight is added to Shabbat. Abraham was known for his hospitality, and rabbis in the Talmud valued hospitality so highly they said it takes precedence over the house of study and welcoming the divine presence. What do the scriptures say about the Shabbat? Even though there are not a lot of specific details about keeping the Shabbat, the Lord has given us a framework to work from, which thankfully we can find in various places throughout the scriptures. No kindling fire. You shall kindle no fire throughout your dwellings on the Sabbath day. A man was picking up sticks and then was stoned. Now, was that about kindling the fire, or was it about resting? And why? Some believe the passage about not kindling a fire is symbolic of keeping the fire of love for God lit, not letting it die out in the first place. We believe it is that, and also not making a physical fire. Now, if you are in an emergency or cold weather and need to light a fire, of course do it. Remember, the Torah is about life. Does this mean you cannot flick on a light switch or start your car engine? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Rest. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the 7th is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. This sounds pretty extreme, but this shows how serious the Lord is about us resting on the Sabbath. This even includes animals. Of course, we should feed the animals as usual on Shabbat, but do so with as little work as possible, because he rested on the Sabbath, so should we. No work. Not only are we commanded to rest, but we are also commanded not to work. What does work mean? There are a few descriptors of what work is, and it is between you and the Lord how to carry this out in your own walk with him. Some say the no work command means no creative work, since God rested from creating on the 7th day. This can include the arts, including culinary art and crafts of any kind. Others say no laborious work like lifting, pulling, pushing, etc. I would say almost definitely no schoolwork, no homework, and as little housework as possible. Still others say nothing to do with the tabernacle. I do not agree with that because the priests did work in the tabernacle on the Sabbath. Have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple violate the Sabbath and yet are innocent? The fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it. It shall not go out. But the priest shall burn wood on it every morning, and he shall lay out the burnt offering on it, and offer up in smoke the fat portions of the peace offerings on it. Fire shall be kept burning continually on the altar. It is not to go out. In a literal sense, the priests did violate the Sabbath because they worked and earned their living on the Sabbath, that prohibited regular work on the weekly Sabbath. In a strict legal sense, they did not violate the Sabbath, because the same series of Torah laws require the priests to do such things to maintain the temple services and ritual. If that be the case, no work related to the tabernacle might then refer to the fabric-related work of the tabernacle, like weaving, sewing, embroidering, etc. No customary work. This one is not specified in the scriptures regarding the weekly Shabbat. It is noted on other Sabbaths, such as the Moedim, which we will discuss a bit later, but no customary work may very well be one of the most well-observed parts of keeping the Shabbat throughout history. What does customary mean? Some people believe it means whatever you customarily do. In other words, what you do during the rest of the week. So if you're a bookkeeper, that means no bookkeeping on Shabbat. If you're a hairstylist, no hairstyle on Shabbat. However, based on one word Yeshua used in Matthew 17:25, I believe no customary work means what we would understand from the passage where Yeshua said, "From whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers?" From that verse, the word custom means something that is accepted as payment. As a result, I believe no customary work means no work for money, whether giving or receiving payment, which also includes not making others work for money, not going to restaurants, no ordering out, no hiring anyone to cut grass or to perform any other work of any kind. Remember, it is a day of rest, not just for you, but for as many people as possible. Why would we want to cause someone else to stumble and do something that is not pleasing to God, like working on the Sabbath? Remember, one law shall be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you. Furthermore, the King James Version lists the no customary work as no servile work, which can often be interpreted as manual or strenuous labor. I believe that, on the whole, not working on Shabbat means a combination of all of these things. For this one, when in doubt, unless it is to serve the Lord, like the priests in the tabernacle or temple, which can include helping someone in need, someone who needs immediate help, not something that can be postponed to another day, like moving. And especially if it is to preserve life, I would recommend that you just not do it. If you mess up and do something the Lord has revealed to you that you didn't do something He urged you to do, or that you did something He said not to do, I would suggest asking for the Lord's help to do better next week. That's the only way we can improve. But if you make a mistake or don't do it as well as you would like, please don't beat yourself up about it. Being too hard on ourselves is counterproductive and really won't motivate us to do better. This I know from experience. Worse yet, being too hard on ourselves may make us not want to even try again for fear of failure. If failure happens, I would suggest getting up, brushing yourself off, pat yourself on the back for trying your best, and try again. Another thing I have learned is that the Lord appreciates our desire to do His will, even if our best intentions are not fulfilled as we would like them to be. Remember that the seventh-day Sabbath is not the only Sabbath written in the Scriptures. There are 7 additional days of no work apart from the original Sabbath, also known as the Moedim, or appointed times. Side note, many people say that Judaism is a religion based on works, but it's interesting to me how there are so many commands to do no work so many times throughout the year. Throughout the Scriptures, when it says something like no customary work, 6 times in Leviticus and 6 times in Numbers, that is also considered a Shabbat. Over 50 weekly 7-day Sabbaths, as well as 7 yearly Sabbaths, which will be shown now. You can pause on the slide to see them in more detail if you'd like. Passover and unleavened bread, or Pesach, Shavuot, or Pentecost, Yom Teruah, or Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement, and Sukkot, tabernacles. This list doesn't include rest for the land every 7 years, returning of property to its original owner, etc. I believe it means that even though the world thrives on us working, our God delights in us resting, and especially resting in Him. Now there is a verse that says, "If anyone will not work, neither shall he eat." But I believe that means that during the week we all work together to accomplish tasks as a team, like harvesting, building, painting, etc. And there shouldn't be anyone loafing around if and when they are able-bodied and still expect to partake of the provisions of the Lord. At this point, your question might be, what if I have to work on Shabbat, Friday night or Saturday day, or on the other no-work festival days because I need the money? This is a tough one. Of course, I cannot by any means tell you what to do. Each decision you make is completely between you and the Lord. What I can say is, please pray about it. When you learn the scriptures and ask God about your particular situation, I believe He will guide you on what to do in your circumstances. If He makes it clear He wants you to talk to your boss and say you feel like it's important not to work on those days, then they have a few options. They can refuse to acknowledge your request and either keep you working those days, or they may choose to fire you. You may say, "But I desperately need the money." If there's one thing we have learned as a family over the years, especially in ministry, is that the Lord is our provider. We have experienced this firsthand. If your job disregards your request for the Sabbath off and want to fire you, then there's a very good chance that maybe that is not the place you need to be, and God Himself will either provide a new and potentially better job for you, or even better, He may provide for your needs without a job just to show He can. And He definitely can, and He will. Remember that. My God shall supply all your need according to His riches and glory by Messiah Yeshua. We are living proof of that. I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. If you tell your boss and the company does approve your request to be off on the Sabbath, believe me, that company will be richly blessed by the Lord, because in this Saturday-based consumption and entertainment economy, allowing employees off that day can potentially affect their bottom line. But just like the Lord would provide for you if you lose your job due to being obedient, so will the job be compensated by the Lord if they take a chance and allow you to be obedient. And if the company or employer doesn't give you the Sabbath off, you have the option, but only if you feel led by the Lord to do so, to either not show up on the Shabbat, or you can also offer up your resignation. Ultimately, if man's rules defy God's rules, according to the Lord, we are permitted to disobey man to obey God. If you feel led to obey the Lord in this way, I am confident that you will be protected and richly blessed. May He always guide your steps. Holy Convocation. This unusual phrase appears 18 times throughout the Torah, including verses about Shabbat. What is a holy convocation, you may ask? Another name for holy convocation is sacred assembly. In Christianity, the passage that is typically used to encourage people to assemble on Sunday, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching, was actually written to the Hebrews. The Hebrew followers of Yeshua, especially in the days the book of Hebrews was written, would never ever have assembled on any other day other than the Sabbath, especially since Yeshua was Jewish and assembled on Shabbat as well. Lately, especially with increased reliance on technology post-2020, people are increasingly disregarding the command to assemble. To me, this ever-popular trend is even more disturbing because there's so much that we stand to gain from assembling together, especially as followers of Yeshua, and so many people are missing out. The enemy knows that we gain spiritual strength and deeper understanding of ourselves and God from assembling, and the enemy is actually succeeding in deceiving everyone to believe that we are better off without it. There is another distressing development of how the enemy is attempting to stop people from assembling on the Sabbath. There is a passage in Exodus where God says, "Let every man remain in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the seventh day." It may be being preached throughout certain internet or YouTube sources, or maybe just through misunderstandings from believers themselves, that this verse means that you should just stay home on the Sabbath. But if you look at it in context, what was really happening was when the Lord was sending manna for the people of Israel in the wilderness, He didn't want them to go out and gather any manna on the Shabbat. So He sent 2 days worth of manna on the sixth day, so they could rest on the Sabbath and not leave their tents to gather manna on Shabbat. Sadly, people are understanding that passage to mean that they should be staying home and not assembling on the Sabbath. The consequences of not assembling. Of course, as I said, I don't believe not assembling should affect people's salvation, but I do believe it will definitely affect their blessings. They are missing out on the potential strength and encouragement that comes from being part of a congregation who loves and serves the Lord, considering one another in order to stir up love and good works. Like the trees in the redwood forest, the roots are intertwined, and is the main reason why those trees have held on so strong and tall for thousands of years. When we are observing the Sabbath alone at home, we are more likely to fall into apathy, despair, and disobedience to the Lord, falling over like a tree without a deep, well-nourished, and/or intertwined root system. The Sabbath is the Lord's prescribed remedy for our spiritual situation, so that iron can sharpen iron, and we can better share the Lord's blessings and joy with each other. Sign or oath. And lastly on this list, the Shabbat was a sign or oath, also known as a seal, for the children of Israel. Speak also to the children of Israel, saying, "Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you." An oath is a seal of a perpetual covenant. Covenants do not end. They can change over time, be revised, and be renewed. But if they are broken, very bad things happen. As you may have seen from other videos on this channel, remember that when we are in Yeshua, we are part of Israel. That means that it is a sign or oath for us as well. That makes things very exciting and may help us to understand the book of Revelation a bit better, especially the part where the servants of God are sealed on their foreheads. I believe that Keeping the Shabbat will be what will distinguish us from the unbelieving nations. And like the blood on the doorposts of the Israelites in Egypt that protected them so that the plague would not hurt them when God struck the land of Egypt, the invisible sign that keeping the Shabbat gives us, like his blood, will provide supernatural protection during the Great Tribulation when the Lord will return and destroy the rulers of the darkness of this age. What can we do on Shabbat? We can assemble physically in a synagogue or home study group, read and study God's Word together, especially Torah portions, sing songs of praise to the Lord together, bless the Lord through liturgy, pray together, as in corporate prayers, eat together or oneg, breaking bread together, representative of showbread, our Messiah, the bread of life, encouraging one another to love and good works, representative of keeping the menorah and the flame on the altar lit, doing good to each other. It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. How should Messianics observe Shabbat? This is an interesting question because every person and every family will find that there are different things about Shabbat that they feel are important to do or not do on Shabbat. Firstly, I believe that the ultimate goal should be to be prepared for the Shabbat before it actually happens each week. If we feel too tired to actually get up on Shabbat morning and attend the weekly assembly, maybe we need to try and do more earlier in the week, not procrastinating, so that we can actually rest early on Friday night and be ready to get up for Shabbat, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. As I have prayed about it, I asked the Lord why he doesn't want us cooking on the Shabbat. And like the Exodus passage about the manna, the answer I received was that he wants us to learn to prepare, especially for the eternal time of rest that is to come. We will speak about that a bit later. Being prepared is a very important topic in the scriptures. The word prepare appears approximately 215 times. As we spoke about before, it is preferable if all prepping and cooking is done beforehand and either just heated up or kept warm for all of the meals on Shabbat, which include Friday night dinner, Saturday brunch, and Saturday dinner. The blessing is that nowadays most of us have a refrigerator that can keep the foods cold and we can just warm things up as needed. If you bring something to your assembly's oneg, if it is not a cold food that is kept cold like salad, it would preferably be one of those meals that would be brought ready warmed up in a crock pot or container with a lid. Please remember to follow food safety rules at all times. The same goes for cleaning to prepare for Shabbat. One of the worst feelings is when the house is a mess and a visitor shows up out of nowhere. Can I get a witness? Preparation for Shabbat by cleaning beforehand, meaning before nightfall on Friday, again, not procrastinating, is a symbol of being ready for when the Lord returns. Even though there are signs when he will return in the end times, like a visitor who comes unannounced, if we are not prepared, he will come upon us when we do not expect him. Like the 5 wise virgins, we need to have our oil or obedience ready for the wedding feast. Even though it is a deep desire and I try very hard, sadly being prepared is not something I do well. Many times it is a combination of busyness and indecision that greatly hinder my progress towards preparedness, especially for Shabbat, and I feel I am still lacking greatly in this department. But I believe the Lord is not looking for perfection. He sees and appreciates all of our efforts and desire to do the best that we can for him. I hope you are not having any of those difficulties, but if you are struggling like I do, perhaps trying some meal planning and time management techniques can help us schedule and portion out activities throughout the week so we are not bombarded by everything that needs to be done last minute on Friday. 2 videos that I hope can possibly be of help are Vayera Time Management and Vayera Meal Planning, which will also be listed in the description box. Traditional Shabbat customs. Additionally, there are quite a few other specific traditions that are associated with Shabbat, especially among the Jewish people. Traditionally, Friday night is spent at home with closest family. It should preferably be a time of rest from the hectic week and reflection on the Lord, in whatever form that takes for you. There are many blessings. There are Shabbat candles that are traditionally lit before the sun goes down on Shabbat. Kiddush, a cup of wine or grape juice to welcome the overflowing blessings of the Shabbat and the fruitfulness of being part of the true vine. 2 loaves of challah bread, one for Friday night, one for Saturday, with the exception of Passover week, where we eat unleavened bread or matzah. Traditionally, the Sabbath day, also known as Saturday, is spent mostly at synagogue, engaging in learning the scriptures and fellowship. Other Shabbat traditions. What about not turning on light switches, no driving, etc. on Shabbat? Many Jews believe it is breaking the command of no kindling fire to turn on light switches and to drive on Shabbat. We believe that turning on a light switch is equivalent to keeping a fire burning throughout the Sabbath, because the electricity is already in the house. Turning on the switch merely accesses the electricity. There are rabbinic commands regarding walking less than a certain amount of time on Shabbat, or else it is considered work. However, to drive, you are not working at all. It is the car that is doing the work, which is not a living being. Furthermore, the combustion in the engine is not actually a fire, because if it was an actual fire, That would be a very bad thing. Furthermore, most of us do not live in close proximity or within walking distance to a synagogue, so the necessity to assemble overrules any potential sparks that may be created by an automobile. But of course, this is up to each person to decide between themselves and the Lord. Again, we believe the scripture is referring to a literal fire, and anything beyond that is potentially fence law territory. There are some things that other traditional Jews do to prepare for Shabbat, like unscrewing the refrigerator light bulbs, putting out tissue boxes in the restroom so that they don't rip toilet paper, etc. These things, although not required, are also not terrible. Attempting to do these things can be good if you feel led to do that. To some, they may seem quite daunting and intimidating, at least they are for me, and can be one of the reasons a lot of Christians and Messianic believers in Yeshua tend to shy away from attempting to keep the Shabbat. If you want to keep those traditions, great, but please remember that you will not be condemned by God for not doing them, nor will God necessarily look on you more favorably if you do them. And if you do these traditions, they should be things you can do with joy. If it feels like a burden, my opinion is that we shouldn't do it. Even the animals rest from their burdens on Shabbat. Remember, the Lord's focus is on how we treat others. Love your neighbor as yourself. If we are so overworked with doing the extraneous tasks of preparing for the Shabbat that we are inhospitable or short-tempered with others and too tired to be good company or assemble on Shabbat, then perhaps we may be taking on too much. Just some food for thought. Speaking of food, the next section will be about meals for Shabbat. What I call best practices are to prep hot Shabbat meals ahead of time, kept on warm in a slow cooker or on a warming plate, a griddle on low heat. Of course, there's no required food to eat except for the requirements of foods that are biblically acceptable for us to eat. See the Tahor Tameh video that will be listed in the description box. But there are some more traditional, what we may like to call, quote, Jewish foods, and one of them is Cholent, also known as dafina in certain regions, which are different forms of Shabbat stew. There are all kinds of cholent, which is an Ashkenazic or German Jewish dish, but cholents can vary widely from country to country and in taste from savory to spicy and include regional and seasonal ingredients. Cholent is called Shabbat stew for a good reason. It requires minimal work. Some would argue that it tastes better the longer it cooks. It works well for serving large groups, being easy to stretch out by just adding more water or broth, and it is great for cool weather, as it is now here in Florida, and colder weather throughout the fall, winter, and early spring in many areas. The recipe for the best cholent we will be using today is one that was chosen to be a preferred recipe out of 7 different ones that we tried leading up to the recording of this video. Thanks so much to everyone who participated. I hope you try this cholent for your Bereshiyt Shabbat oneg to commemorate the Bereshiyt Torah portion. Most cholent recipes contain some sort of meat, but because this week we are celebrating the Bereshiyt Torah portion, where Adam and Eve did not eat any animals, I decided to go the vegetarian route. This recipe has been adapted from a recipe called You Won't Believe It's Part of Cholent from My Kitchen, My Studio. I will be linking the original recipe in the credits at the end of the video as well as in the description box. It was originally a vegan recipe and I adapted it to make it vegetarian instead. The original recipe is listed for 6 servings. This modified recipe will serve at least 12 depending on the serving size portion. For added bonus material, this cholent recipe is also one of the simplest and least expensive one out of all those we tried, which can totally be a blessing, especially when you're short on time, on a tight budget, or both. For the ingredients, a half a cup of oil, 2 large or 3 small onions diced, 6 cloves of garlic crushed, or 6 teaspoons of minced, 1½ cups of quinoa, 1½ cup of cholent beans, 2 tablespoons of sweet paprika, 2 tablespoons of smoked paprika, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of onion powder, 2 tablespoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of pepper, 8 medium potatoes cubed, and 12 eggs, whole in shell. If you prefer a vegan cholent, you can omit the eggs. In a large frying pan or in a slow cooker with a sauté setting if you have one, sauté onion in the oil over medium heat for about 10 minutes until it reaches close to your preferred doneness. Add garlic and sauté for an additional 2 minutes. Add beans and quinoa and continue sautéing so they get toasted about 3 to 5 minutes. Add the spices and mix. Add potatoes. Stir everything together and cook for about 5 to 7 minutes. If using a frying pan, transfer to the slow cooker. Cover with water until at least 2 inches over the top level of the ingredients. Cook overnight on low, approximately 200 degrees, for at least 6 hours. If you're in a rush, you can also raise the temperature to high, approximately 350 degrees, for 3 to 4 hours. But the cholent will taste better on a long, slow simmer. Remember to check the cholent every hour or so to make sure it is not drying out. If it is drying out, add more, preferably warm or hot water, to cover it. It is interesting to note that in Bereshit, when the creation account is being narrated, on every day it says there was evening and morning on day 1, day 2, etc. However, for the seventh day, there is no evening and morning stated. Many take this to confirm what it says in the world to come, which can also be known as the Millennial Reign, which is what the Sabbath is supposed to point us to, based on the book of Revelation. There will be no night or darkness. The light of the world, our Messiah Yeshua, will be the eternal light that will illuminate all of our eternal time of rest. That will be the most beautiful blessing of all. Thank you so much for joining me. Praying your Bereshit Shabbat Oneg with your family and congregation are richly blessed, and may the Lord richly bless all of you and your families.